back to Right Talk, and the issues we're talking about here are complex, and if I sound like I'm muddling along through here, because there's so many facets to it, because as I started to mention in the previous segment, not only do we have problems with ranchers, we have problems with environmentalists that are now in control of the BLM, but I also mentioned the Obama administration itself is anti-West. Now they may claim that they're for us when they come out here for their political speeches and trying to garner votes, but the West is rapidly turning red and has been for years, and this flies in the face of what the ideals of socialism and the far left that Obama espouses is in agreement with. Now I'm going to bring Amy Nelson into the conversation here, because Amy's got some information to add about the Bundys, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you now, Amy.
Thank you. I received emails during the Bundy time period, and I got to read about what the problem really was about. Mrs. Bundy explained that their family had gone into agreement for what the BLM would be responsible for, and for allowing them to let their animals continue to graze like they had done for generations, and the BLM reneged on that agreement, and so that began the battle. And the BLM is really involved in 92% of the state of Nevada. They want to control more land, which would give a lot more ranchers the same dilemma that the Bundys are facing right now. And it would not give the access to families to explore the state. It would not give access to people who like to go out and do their their findings with their little metal detectors, and whatever their recreation might be is going to restrict us even more. But the Bundy dilemma will become a dilemma for all ranchers in this category, in this further land grab that I call it, that the BLM is proposing. And you won't be able to ride your animals, you won't be able to access your properties if you own land in that area, on and on. But you have some other details about it. But that's the crux of the problem with the Bundys. Not that they owed money. It was never about money. It was about the control that the BLM had, and the fact that they would renege on a contract, and to bully any rancher, they would go and forcibly remove property that they had no legal right to remove. And that happened in Nye County, but we had a constitutional sheriff that actually confronted them, said, where's your paperwork to take this property? And if they couldn't produce it from the courts in this county, then they were turned away. But unfortunately in Clark County, that didn't happen.
Yes, continuing on with some of the information I'll add to what Amy is talking about. Already, like Amy said, the federal government controls 92% of Nevada. Now this was never intended to be this way. When our state was founded, back during the Civil War, like all states, the federal government would have the property, but the intent of Congress had always been to sell the property off and to use the funds for the sale of the property to run the government. Back in the early days of our republic, there were no income taxes. They didn't have all of the levies against this and fees against that. They depended upon land sales to actually finance the federal government, and the federal government was a much smaller institution. The states had a lot more control of affairs. What happened with Nevada? Now Nevada and the Southwest came about by a treaty with Mexico called the Treaty of Guadalupe in 1846. And as many of you know, we had a war with Mexico that ended favorably for the United States. And part of the negotiations was that we took control of what's now California, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, vast stretches of the West. And our country grew as a result. And so the federal government held the lands from Nevada. Now Nevada at one time was part of what was called Utah Territory. So Utah, the state of Utah, and the state of Nevada now, we're all one piece of land, which is how the country grew. They would break off chunks of land and form individual states based upon the needs of the people and oftentimes natural boundaries like mountains or rivers. Well, Nevada, because the Civil War was raging, Abraham Lincoln and his government decided that we're going to go ahead and let Nevada become a state, and then we're going to divest of the land, and we're going to use the land to finance the expenses of the Civil War, because it was a very expensive war, and as I said, they didn't have a tax base back then. And so the people in our state believed the government, and we're patriotic, and says, fine, we're going to go ahead and agree to allow the federal government maintain ownership of the land, and so they can sell the land and pay for the Civil War. Now, within that agreement, there's also something you never hear about. It's never in the news. It's never in articles. Our state legislatures and the governors and Congress have never mentioned the fact that in this agreement, 5% of the sale of these federal lands was supposed to be returned to the state of Nevada. Well, because they've never divested of the land, we've obviously never received any fees for the sale of our land. And it gets into a bigger problem. What business does the government have in keeping our state from us? Now, there have been efforts by our state legislature going back into the 50s, I believe it was 1956 to be exact, where the state voters got together and voted that we wanted to have the government divest itself of land and give it back to us. It was voted upon. Our delegations went to Congress, and the congressmen in other states just flat have refused to give us back our land. Why that is important, I don't know. Well, when you start getting into these ecology movements and the tree huggers, I call them, becoming more influential in the government, they looked at the far west as we're some type of Disneyland for the rest of the country. Now, they don't come out here. You see tourism out here, mostly for gambling and so forth, but it's really the people that live in Nevada and or Utah and Arizona that get out into the property. They go out prospecting for gold. They go out camping and hunting. It's the type of people we are. We're rural people, even though we have large metropolitan areas in Las Vegas and a very large city up in Las Vegas. But as we go forward here, we're going to start seeing how this has really morphed into a problem with the Obama administration himself. Now, President Obama and Vice President Biden came out earlier with this thing that they call the Lands Legacy Initiative. I call this a scam, but what it amounts to is not only do they want to control all the lands that they have under federal control now, but they also want to control the private public lands. We'll be right back after this.